Pay close attention. The news you're about to see is fulfilling Bible prophecy.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you the news that relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yisrael Hawkins. Well, today in the news, Katan, we're going to look at the very scary but real possibilities of cyber warfare. We also have an update on the Nepal earthquake and more statistics showing that people are continually leaving the Catholic Church in search for something different. Right. But first, we're going to take a look at some of the backlash of the recent Freddie Gray incident. Now, violent riots that erupted in Baltimore after the burial of Freddie Gray left about 20 businesses and 144 cars burned, as well as many businesses looted. The mayor of Baltimore, Stephanie Rawlings Blake, commenting on the devastation, said, "This is one of our darkest days as a city, and I know that we are much better than this. We know that the world is watching, and we cannot allow our city to evolve into chaos because of a small group of criminals that are moving throughout the city."
Well, despite the violence, there were peaceful protesters there as well, speaking against the violence, which the mayor also commented on. Said, "What you saw tonight, the demonstration tonight by the faith community coming together to take to the streets, I think speaks to the real heart and soul of our city, that we are not going to allow our beautiful city to be destroyed. We will bring order from this chaos. We will bring those who seek to destroy us to justice, and it will take all of us going above and beyond to get us back."
When asked what the mayor thought of this destruction that swept across the city, she got emotional, saying, "It is extremely heartbreaking for someone who was born and raised in Baltimore. My parents are born and raised here. We know how hard people work to have the city we know and love. And to watch a group of criminals go through our city with an intent to destroy, what does it solve?" she said. "You don't get justice for that. What does it solve? You hear people say that they care about their community and they want to be heard. You can't care about your community," she said, "and do what they did."
It seems more counterproductive than anything.
That's right.
Well, more than 20 officers were injured during the riots, some seriously as well as bystanders. So far, there have been over 200 arrests made, and following the riots, a curfew was imposed on schools, which were also closed, and the National Guard was called in to help regain control of the city.
Well, many citizens came out while the destruction was taking place to witness it for themselves and speak out against it. One pastor of a Southern Baptist church saw a community project go up in flames. When asked about it, he said, "We've been building a senior house facility for 60 senior citizen apartments with a transformation center for counseling services to help to change this community."
He continued, "This is $16 million that the church has been investing in this community when nobody else wanted to invest in it. And somebody was insensitive and uncaring enough to do something like this to what we're trying to build in the community. This is not the justice that we seek. This is chaos," and he says, confusion. Chaos and confusion.
Well, one resident speaking to a reporter talked about how much this is hurting the community, stating, "We have so many limited resources here. If you look around here, you don't see Giant, you don't see Safeway, you don't see any of the major supermarkets. This is a food desert. People depend on food stamps and the local stores here and this city's market to eat, and you're tearing it up. The one area where we, the people, can shop. That doesn't make sense. This has nothing to do with Freddie Gray."
When asked what Freddie Gray's situation did to the community, she said, "It gave them a catalyst. It gave them a reason to erupt." She went on to address the rioters, saying, "It gave you an excuse. His family asked for peace. And we as citizens of Baltimore needed to do nothing but respect their wishes today. Today, just respect them. Allow them to bury their loved one. Allow them to mourn without this.
Well, the New York Post recently said, "Send in the moms to tame the Baltimore rioters," referring to one woman in particular who took matters into her own hands, literally. When Toya Graham of Baltimore recognized her 16-year-old son in a crowd of teens vandalizing and looting, she confronted her son, yelling at him and striking him multiple times in the head. Now, a video of the moment quickly spread on TV and social media.
Well, since the incident, more than 2 million people have viewed her emotional response, and the hashtag Mom of the Year began trending on Twitter. In an interview with RT, the single mom of 6 had this to say about her son. "He is just like the other teenagers that doesn't have the perfect relationship with the police officers in Baltimore City. But you will not be throwing rocks and stones at police officers," she said.
Well, Toya Graham wrapped up the interview by repeating an important lesson of character for all of us, saying, "Two wrongs don't make a right," and finished by saying, "At the end of the day, I just wanted to make sure I had gotten my son home."
Interesting. Two wrongs don't make a right. Well, in a recent press conference, Russian President Vladimir Putin expressed his dislike for the double standard the United States holds over Russia and other countries, quoting an old Latin proverb. He said, "And I keep thinking back to what people used to say about that in ancient times. If we remember this aphorism, what Jupiter is entitled to, an ox is not."
Well, he continued, "We cannot agree to those rules. An ox might not be entitled to something like that, but let me tell you, the bear," and that's what he said, Catan, the bear, referring, of course, to Russia, is not asking anyone for permission, is not asking anyone for permission.
Very bold statement, yes.
He went on to explain how the bear isn't looking to migrate to other parts of the world, but he warned at the same time the bear will not give up its tiger to anyone. It will not surrender its tiger.
Interesting. Well, Putin stated that Russia is against foreign governments financing political activism in their country, pointing out that the United States government would never allow this in the West. He explained, in the United States, international observers are not allowed to polling stations during the elections. They face arrest and time in prison, even when they are stationed by the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe.
Well, finally, he compared the voting systems of Russia and the United States, arguing how truly undemocratic the United States is by using an electoral college, which can be disproportionate with the population of each state, while in Russia, it allows for a direct vote to elect their president. So
strictly by the numbers.
That's right.
Well, we're going to turn it over to our field correspondent, Larry McGee, as we continue our report on the earthquake that is taking place in Nepal, the search and rescue efforts, and the death toll that has been continuously climbing. Larry, what is the death toll looking like now?
The total has now reached over 6,200 dead, with 14,000 injured, as the nation of Nepal takes its turn, struggling to deal with the catastrophic earthquakes and environmental disasters which have taken a sharp incline over the last several years. Nepalese homes have been demolished. Years of hard work has disappeared in an instant, and tearful parents recount stories of having lost young children whom they say died like squashed ants or common dogs. According to Red Cross reports, 40,000 homes were injured or destroyed in the disaster, and residents report very little, if any, assistance coming from the government. In the chaos, food has become scarce, with occasional relief coming principally from private donors. They may be called the government, one man said, but they don't do anything to help the people. A lack of compassion is also producing dissatisfaction and frustration elsewhere, as the world's largest religion is reportedly losing its hold in what used to be one of its biggest population centers. Throughout the lion's share of the 20th century, over 90% of Latin America identified themselves as Catholic. But according to a recent survey conducted by the Pew Research Center, only 69% of Latin Americans identify themselves as being affiliated with Catholicism today. The decline is being attributed to what's being called religious switching, with many of those who've changed over to the Protestantism of Martin Luther citing their reason for leaving as seeking to find a personal connection with the Creator. Also high on the list was the desire to find a religion which helps its members, showing that the world's wealthiest and most powerful religion is yet very poor and worthless when it comes to true love. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
Wow, truly a sad situation, but as Larry reported, that death toll, I'm sure, is going to increase as they continue to dig out and, search for the missing people. It always goes a lot higher.
That's right. Well, take a look at this short video about a man who wrote a book, about what he saw as the coming way in which we would be using books, obtaining information, and so forth. And interestingly enough, Jeff, this work of his was done in 1934. 1934, right. So why don't we take a look and see what he has to say. Some interesting points here.
Also in 1934, Otley publishes his most important book, The Treatise on Documentation, the Book on the Book. This is where we find the most visionary pages, where already the concept of the computer emerges.
Here, the workspace is no longer cluttered with any books. In their place, a screen and a telephone within reach. Over there, in an immense edifice, are all the books and information. From there, the page to be read, in order to know the answer to the question asked by telephone, is made to appear on the screen. The screen could be divided in half, by 4, or even by 10. If multiple texts and documents had to be consulted simultaneously. There would be a loudspeaker if the image had to be complemented by oral data, and this improvement could continue to the point of automating the call for on-screen data. Cinema, phonographs, radio, television, these instruments taken as substitutes for the book will in fact become the new book. The most powerful works for the diffusion of human thought. This will be the radiated library and the televised book.
Well, definitely seems like he was a man whose thought process was a lot farther ahead of his time.
Well, several years ago, speculation was made as to the possibility to create a new type of war, but one that's not fought in different lands over borders, but over information. Information warfare, or cyber war as it's called, could cause problems in almost every facet of life, from disabling critical infrastructures in major cities to extorting millions of dollars from banks all over the world, including stealing the identity and personal information and even infiltrating defense systems and sabotaging our weapon systems.
Right. Well, today all these things and more are actually occurring. Jim Lewis, Director and Senior Fellow of the Technology and Public Policy Program at the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, D.C., said, in 2007, the U.S. experienced what they call the electronic version of Pearl Harbor. A foreign country infiltrated systems of the United States Departments of Defense, State, Commerce, Energy, NASA, and even other high-tech agencies. And when they were there, they stole terabytes. Terabytes of information. Lots of information was stolen.
Well, by comparison, the Library of Congress has millions of volumes of books, and that is the equivalent to about 12 terabytes of information. So compare that. The Library of Congress is about 12 terabytes of information.
Wow.
So a Library of Congress worth of government information was stolen in 2007. Now that was the eye-opener that made everyone say, hey, we've got to get a grip on this.
Wow. Well, in fact, last November, someone was able to get past the encryption systems and firewalls of one of the most sensitive military computer systems and stay inside for several days. This was at the CENTCOM Center, and their systems were the ones that were infiltrated. And once that person or group was inside the system, they were able to sit back and kindly just watch what was taking place, watch what was going on in the United States and the moves they were making and so forth. It was believed that the breach was made by foreign spies who left corrupted memory sticks lying around, the little flash drives, and as soon as one was inserted, a malicious code was left for a backdoor for a foreign power to get into the system.
Of course, since then, the military has banned those little memory sticks known as flash drives. One of the reasons these breaches are possible is because some authorities don't want to believe that their systems are vulnerable. And as a result, we're dying a death of 1,000 cuts, as one man said. Now, each day, a little more of our intellectual property, innovative skills, military technology is stolen by somebody. It's like little drops, and eventually we'll drown, but every day we don't notice it.
Well, the U.S. Congress has also allocated $17 billion to improve data defense systems, and Lieutenant General Keith Alexander, head of the NSA, has also been nominated by the Department of Defense to run a new military command devoted to offensive and defensive cyber war. Other countries say that the U.S. is doing the same to them as is being done to the U.S., but the U.S. says that it has the most to lose because it has the most to steal than any other country. Well, the U.S. has woven the internet into every aspect of society, so a damaging breach could cripple many systems as well as gravely affect many aspects of life.
Well, even the country's weapons are vulnerable, so weapons manufacturers make their own computer chips. Jim Gosler, considered to be the father of cyber war, said most computer chips are made abroad and concerns are growing. The concerns are that someone overseas could tamper with them. Now, the concern is that those chips could cause altered functioning in that they wouldn't do their job as they were designed to do. And for instance, not detonating or detonating prior to, at the wrong time, I should say. And Katan, now there are literally like tens of thousands of these attacks, the cyber war, taking place every day in the United States.
Wow. So war on a, not a microscopic, but like a data type level. Wow, interesting. Well, on that same note, low Earth orbit satellites are extremely indispensable to the U.S. military for communication, GPS navigation for troops, and smart bomb guidance, as well as for real-time surveillance. But they're also very vulnerable. A satellite killing weapon recently released by China demonstrates that vulnerability.
John Pike with globalsecurity.org said the first thing an enemy would do would be to shoot down all our low Earth orbit satellites, putting out our eyes. Now, China demonstrated this potential by shooting down one of its own aging weather satellites. After 3 misses, they were successful with a medium-range ballistic missile fired from the ground. Now, the U.S. tracked the activity and the debris that fell to Earth from its polar orbit, which was 537 miles above the Earth.
Well, the U.S.'s space policy, freedom of action in space, states that they will deny, if necessary, adversaries the use of space capabilities hostile to U.S. national interest. Well, as we see war, violence, international bullying, the shaking of the earth causing countless deaths and suffering, to a lack of trust among the nations, and even cyber war, it looks as though this world doesn't offer a very bright future, except the brightness that many experts are saying are going to come as the result of nuclear war. Well, Yeshua Hawkins of the House of Yahweh has been bringing forth the prophecies concerning this generation, what's to come, and how mankind can be saved from the prophesied destruction. Do you want to know more? Well, here's what you can do.
You can contact the House of Yahweh today and request your free Prophetic Word magazine and monthly newsletter. Now, you can write them at The House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. Visit them on any of their websites, www.yahweh.com, www.yisraelhawkins.com, or www.yahwehsbranch.com. You can also email them at info@yahweh.com. And for any calls outside the United States, please call the number on your screen.
Well, don't go anywhere. Up next, Yisrael Hawkins bringing you the news as it relates to Bible prophecy and also the light of the laws, which brings you to perfection. For all of us here at YPN News, I'm Katan Alexander.
And I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
Thank you for watching.